Good morning, friends. I'm here in Holland, Michigan, and tomorrow I'll be driving to Traverse City and speak in a church. So I'll appreciate your prayers. I want to continue our Bible study in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, beginning at verse 13, because we completed up to verse 12, 13 all the way to verse 40. So 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 13 to 40. Two important things that Paul is trying to address in this chapter. One is intelligent worship, and the other is orderly worship. How a Christian worship should be intelligent and orderly worship. And the purpose is that, it should be understandable and it should be orderly. That's what he writes in verse 40, last verse of the chapter. But everything should be done in a fitting and orderly way. As I told you, the first century church misunderstood the gift of speaking in tongue. So there were utterance and there was also language. For Paul, speaking in tongue is something that you do which is with intelligible words. You are actually, you do not know Chinese, but you suddenly given with a gift of speaking in Chinese. You speak in Chinese, and so you ensure that somebody who is there who can interpret your Chinese language. Paul is not against speaking in tongue, because in verse 18 he says, I thank God that I speak in tongue more than all of you. Paul himself was gifted in speaking tongue. And Paul also doesn't say that you should stop speaking in tongue. In verse 39, he says, if God has given you gift, you must practice that gift. Therefore, my brothers, in verse 39, be eager to prophesy and do not forbid speaking in tongues. So if you have that miraculous gift of speaking in another language, use that gift, because that gift is a sign for unbelievers. He says tongues in verse 22. Tongues then are a sign not for believers but for unbelievers, because the unbelievers will be surprised to see this miracle happening. You speaking in tongue, a language which you do not know, and suddenly God has given you. So it's a very good sign. On the other hand, Paul also recognized that in the first century, some of them were gifted with utterance. And that's a different kind of speaking tongue. But Paul says that that is for your own edification. That's not for others. So he uses, in verse 15, he says, for this reason, anyone who speaks in tongue should pray that he may interpret what he says. For if I pray in tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. In utterance, your mind becomes unfruitful. So it's really not helpful. So what shall I do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will also pray with my mind. You say, yes, utterance is good, but use your mind. And utterance is personally edifying. So why not you practice that utterance in quietness? Because that doesn't help anybody. Like in verse 23, he says, so if the whole church comes together and everyone speaks in tongue, and some who do not understand or some unbelievers come in, will they not say that you are out of your mind? You say, you will confuse them, they are saying. In verse 24, he says, but if an unbeliever or someone who does not understand comes in while everybody is prophesying, if you are doing a Bible study, you're using intelligent mind and intelligent words, then he says, in that case, this person will be convinced by all that he is a sinner, and he'll be judged by all, and the secrets of the heart will be laid bare. He'll be exposed to his own sin, and that way he will have a conviction. So I would rather prefer that in a gathering, you use intelligible words, do prophesy, and if at all you're gifted with speaking tongue, make sure that you have an interpreter, and that speaking tongue is like speaking another national language, not simply utterance. So he goes on in verse 27, he says, if anyone speaks in a tongue or two or at most three, should speak one at a time. Even if you have, intelligible words, don't speak all at a time, but speak one after another. If there is no interpreter, the speaker should keep quiet in the church and speak to himself and God. Another important issue was there in the first century church, that women were emotional, and women sometimes, because of their spirituality and emotional mixed up, they would bring chaos and disorderliness in the church. So Paul is speaking to the women in verse 34. Women should remain silent in the churches. Now he's not making a blanket statement, general statement for all women, but here is a women who are emotional, uncontrollable, and not listening to others, not caring for the orderliness, but more chaotic. So that's why Paul says women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. So why not you first of all try to learn at home from your husband? For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church, because you are exposing your foolishness in public. So that was the situation in the first century. I don't know how much it is the same situation in your church. Probably in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and also verse chapter 13 will be very helpful passage to preach and also study. I'm sure we can make our worship much more intelligible and orderly. May God bless you. May He continues to use you as a mighty instrument for His kingdom's cause. Blessings, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.